It is time now for Money Power Politics, and we are tracking even more alarming economic data. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Producer Price Index rose nearly 1.5% in April, while wholesale prices climbed 6% compared to last year. That is the fastest rate we have seen in 4 years. The Wall Street Journal is reporting this data is putting investors increasingly on edge about inflation. Take today's stock action, for example, a quick glance, and you might not even notice the anxiety simmering beneath the surface. The Nasdaq jumped more than 1%, while the S&P rose to yet another record high. But that is only because tech stocks outperformed the rest of the market. The majority of stocks traded lower. But I do have to point out, corporate earnings remain very, very strong. That is different from what is happening to everyday Americans. Everyday Americans are feeling more and more negative because life's expensive. The nightcap is still here. Okay, Tim. People keep a very close eye on CPI, the measure of inflation for consumers. But for economists, it is all about PPI, the price for producers. And these numbers are far from what anyone wanted to see.
Well, I mean, both, the price pressures that producers are dealing with and then the prices that consumers are seeing on their shelves. Those are, it is compressing the U.S. economy.
But the producers, when they're suffering, the consumers are going to suffer down the line.
Well, they're going to suffer. I mean, the consumers get it from both ends.
Yes.
But all of this are indicators of the immense inflationary pressure that's around the U.S. economy because Donald Trump has engaged in a series of cell phones since a year ago, starting with the tariffs and moving now through the war with Iran. And we're in the very early innings of it. I think that at a minimum, there's going to be a longer knockoff effect, even if oil starts moving through the Strait of Hormuz again. But there's no indication anyway that that's going to happen anytime soon. And we're seeing it in gas prices, electricity, food. And now companies themselves have had their stock prices sort of aloft on robust profits. And stock prices are an indicator of how profitable corporate America is. If their own input costs are elevating, it's going to crimp their profits. If their profits crimp, their stock prices go down. If consumers can't keep consuming, 2/3 of GDP is consumer spending, then the broader economy also suffers. It is, I don't want the economy to go completely south because innocent average people will get swept up in that damage. But it looks like that's going to happen. And there's very little at this point that Trump can do to control it.
How about the most 2026 market economic headline we saw today? Cisco, which is sort of a foundational company in providing internet infrastructure, has a headline, they're cutting 4,000 jobs, right? And what happens? The stock jumps 15%, right? Why? Because they are moving to an AI direction. Like, doesn't that just encapsulate where we are? 4,000 people are losing their job. But for people who are invested in Cisco, you just got a 15% pop today. Welcome to AI.
Well, that was your point. The corporate earnings might be going very, very well for the moment, but the average American right now and the voter is certainly aware that that has very little impact on their bottom line. They are thinking a lot about a crony capitalism now, right? Because they, as we were talking about earlier, they see people in Trump's orbit doing well, announcing this deal and that deal and how great those businesses are doing. But what's really happening to the average American today? I was upstate over the weekend. A lot of Republicans live upstate, a lot of really small towns and a lot of farmers. And I've talked to a bunch of them, and they're saying over and over again, they may have supported this president, but they can't escape the fact that they are just not doing well.
But are they going to vote for him again? Because you know what amazes me? Yeah. I mean, the amount of farms, for example, that are closing in this country, and the president seems to still have those voters on lock.
So the way I think about it is this. I think largely Republicans will still vote for him. But if you're a Democrat, what you have to do is look at the independents. That there are a lot of pockets of support that Donald Trump had among independents and even among core Democratic voters. Latino voters, Black voters voted for him in larger numbers than before. But he's losing that support. He's losing support among young men as well. By the way, a lot of young men who were told you don't have to go to college, but now can't even find work, right? And so all of these promises that he made to people, he hasn't followed through upon. And in fact, in many ways, made their lives a lot worse because he's closed off opportunity.
I'd add to that there are some people who may not feel comfortable coming out and saying, I've turned against this person, but they may just not show up come the midterms. I was in Georgia just a couple weeks ago, where in a rural community that is battling both a massive ICE warehouse detention center that the Trump administration wants to put 10,000 people in. This is a town that like 75% of the people there voted for Trump, and they're battling a data center as well.
I'm guessing they don't have a hospital nearby either.
They have very small rural hospitals nearby that have had programs cut, that are panicked about being able to serve the community that's already there. And then the idea of 10,000 immigrants being put into a building that they would also be servicing, complete panic. So, they are starting to feel like they got conned. I had conversations where words like betrayal, confused, wish he would come here and talk to us. Like, there was really this sense of, I think, almost shame and embarrassment from some. And they weren't ready to say they hate the guy, but I met people who were saying they're not going to come out to support, for example, Congressman Mike Collins, who's running for Senate there right now. And so that is the real thing. And I think that's a little bit harder for people to measure. It's harder sometimes for reporters to gauge, too, in the field, people who are saying, I'm still sort of on this team, but I just might not show up in a few months when my team actually needs me to get out and play the game.
Amit, you know who is coming out this election in these midterms? Big tech firms. AI lobbying is hitting a fever level, okay? Between Meta, NVIDIA, and Alphabet, they have already spent $47.8 million on federal lobbying going into the midterms. What do you make of that?
I mean, although Sam Altman did previously say he wants all this regulation, they're putting the money in the opposite direction. They're now saying, the regulation is going to prevent our innovation. They're making all these other cases. But the thing is, the American people, although like AI has a lot of great applications when it comes to, productivity and using it as an individual, what I think a lot of companies are also cutting jobs and using AI as cover as well, but the American people see this as job loss, right? And not only that, on top of all of this, when you have Trump going to China with AI executives around him, when you have now we got the CPI and the PPI going the direction it is, we're seeing on this side I don't know about broligarchy. I guess that's what we call it, broligarchy. That's forming here, and at the same time, to Antonia's point, the con is collapsing. That's what's happening here. When you look at the poll, CNN poll, for example, we saw 77% of Americans blame Trump's policies for raising prices in their community. And really, it got overlooked. A majority of Republicans blame Trump for the rising costs in their communities. That is a big deal. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, that was one of the first shoes to drop. We see the MAGA fractures in the media landscape. And now you look at the PPI. CPI is a lagging indicator, right? Because PPI,
CPI is the leader.
Yeah, the leader, the wholesalers, they're paying the cost. They're going to then pass it on to the consumer later on. So right now, what we're seeing is that a compounding effect of increasing prices as the midterms are looming, as Iran sees that they have a runway here with the blockade. Intel says they got time. We could see them wait it out towards the midterms, and then Republicans might be cooked in spite of the gerrymandering.